At my joinery business, the employees own 45% of it. One of my values that I think is really important to bring an organization along, especially with those hard moments, is to make them business owners, mentally give them a stake in the game. I use the example of a Michael Jordan or a Michael Jackson. I'm not that talented. And so how do I get my organization aligned to move in the exact same direction? And that's a really important aspect for me. Providing equity and an upside to the employees is one of those phenomenal alignment tools. Number two, just always be honest and share with the organization the good times and the bad. And if there are bad times, I promise you, if you're honest and open with your organization, they're going to rally around the business. There's a phrase that my staff uses. We are stupid transparent, but we're not stupid. And that transparency, I think, is healthy. And when you combine like number one and number two together, I think my employees can handle understanding the nuances of a business.
Welcome to Site to Studio. Today we have Mark Sanderson from Innergy, as well as Wilkie Sanderson.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the time that we get to chat for the next hour or so.
Thank you. So just for the viewers, a quick introduction. Who's Mark Sanderson?
Oh, that's great. There are numerous ways that one can define oneself. Probably let me start in a couple different ways. One, I'm a father of three. Two, you always think about what do you do for yourself. I love theater. So I just literally got off stage at a community theater. I was the Reverend in Footloose. So if you're familiar with that production, that's another way one can define oneself, is in terms of what you do. But probably most importantly, what we're talking about here, I have a joinery shop or a woodworking shop. That's what we call it in the States. We're doing about 30 million Australian in terms of equivalency, 75 employees, 6,600 square meters in terms of our production space. And that joinery work, it's all bespoke, all custom. In addition to that, I also have a software firm that's servicing the joinery industry, shop fitters, et cetera, cabinet makers. We have an ERP package that elevates joinery and shop fitter companies to the next level. And so maybe that's the short version of why I'm sitting before you and why I'm here, and maybe a little bit of the bio.
Yes. And how our paths crossed was, we were just looking at the email I sent to you
Yes.
Innergy 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was inquiring about the ERP product.
Yes.
And now I am a raving customer.
Oh, I love that. Our whole mission is about creating raving fans.
Yes.
If in the process we end up making money, that's great. But and I would argue that having raving fans, because of our product, our service, and our education, will help us make money at some point in time. But it's all about the raving fans. We want to create raving fans, absolutely. And as I said earlier, elevate, if you will, elevate your business to the next level. Help everybody succeed. And that, I would even say that that's part of my personal mission. So I'm really excited to be sitting here and just chatting about some of the stuff and seeing your operation here, hopefully after we're done.
Yes, I'd love some tips. So, I love Innergy, but when I'm speaking to some of my peers sometimes, I struggle to give the elevator pitch about why it's so amazing for me.
Yeah.
I need to sit down with them for an hour to show them everything.
Yeah.
Why is Innergy so good? What is the value?
Yeah, I think that the pitch that I would argue, Innergy at the end of the day, if you're just thinking about it as software, it's nothing more than a tool. And so whether it's a CNC or a beam saw or a table saw or a router, all the tools that we're using in our business are just that, are a tool. The elevation, I would argue, is that tool coupled with the education and the philosophy around it of theory constraints, one piece flow, how to make sure that you're filling the plane, which is a theme that we talk about on a regular basis. It's that philosophical component that is coupled with the software, just heightening those elements. That's what's going to make a business different. I would say that would be point number one. Point number two, and this is kind of my trite phrase, maybe not so trite, but just my staff numbers of phrases that I end up using. And this is one that I end up using. When people come to us to buy an ERP package, really what they want is change in their organization. Oh, by the way, they're buying software, but at the end of the day, it's about change. The business owners want to go from point A to point B. They want to elevate their business. They want to have something that is that catalyst that creates that sense of urgency that the organization can rally around. And there are programs out there that can do that. But here we offer the education, the service, the support, and the product to unite the organization and align them all in one direction. Maybe that's a little bit longer than an elevator pitch. Maybe we're on the 22nd floor now in terms of that elevator pitch. But I would argue those are the two differentiators. We can talk about the rest of the value prop that we bring to the table, but those two, I would argue, are number one and number two in terms of that differentiation.
Right. I mean, that helps me a lot understand why I love Innergy so much, because you can get the education piece quite easily.
Yes.
You can get the software piece, which is the tooling.
Yes, exactly.
The picks and the shovels.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can get that very easily. But having the two work together and reducing the friction between getting the two working together.
Absolutely.
That is the 1 + 1 = 7, 8, 9 moment.
Exactly. I love the fact that using phrases of that 1 + 1 = 3 is exactly what we try and do. And it's the plus sign in that equation that we think is the leverage, is that force multiplier. And so think about the details. And you as a raving fan, you already know this. The fact that we have an LMS system, and that LMS, you can use that to leverage with your employees. It's like, hey, you need to learn a little bit more about how to fill the plane. What does that concept mean to maximizing the profitability of the organization? Here are 3, 4, or 5 different videos that are on LMS in our learning management system, absolutely free. And so you can start to think about that curriculum for each and every one of your employees and the roles in your company, coupled with the software that is connected with that, coupled with hands-on learning of like the regional event that we just did that you attended yesterday. All of those pieces come together, as you said. 1 + 1 + 1 is equaling that 7 or 8. It's the package, I would argue, ends up making, from my perspective, gets me excited about raving fans.
Yes. But I must also give some praise to the tool itself.
Yeah.
Because with software tools, I found in the past, so many businesses run a big suite of small tools.
Yes.
Or they run one centralized tool that has too much friction, or I'm not sure if software is an 80-20 rule. I think it needs to be more like 95-5. I think
agree.
it needs that last 15% in there.
Yes.
Otherwise, it adds too much friction to the process.
Yes.
So what I love about Innergy is that the software actually works, and it feels like we're using 21st century software as opposed to some legacy Microsoft XP feeling. You know, everything's hosted on Azure servers. Everything's snappy. It's always up. The buttons make sense. The UI makes sense. I'm sure the phone app will get better.
It will. It will.
And, but I think it's the lack of friction, the fact that the tools actually work.
Yes.
The fact that a joinery business owner has developed this over the last 2 decades.
Yes.
And you can see it because all the little features in there that you wish you would have and you didn't know you need are there.
Yeah. You just articulated 3 of our value propositions, 3 of the pieces that we argue that we strive for. One data set that's birth to death. And in that friction piece that you talk about, how do you make sure that you're leveraging that information all the way through? So it's not double data entry, or I've seen some organizations where it's triple data entry. No. How do we get the force multiplier and the fact that the data already exists? You get the parametrics on the front end in terms of your estimate, and then you just leverage that in project management in terms of bill of materials, in terms of putting the work orders together, et cetera. So that was kind of the first point that you made in terms of one data, the architecture. We spent a lot of time thinking about that and making sure it was one data set from birth to death. Second, and you kind of implied this a little bit, and this is how we word this value proposition: for woodworkers by woodworkers, for joiners by joiners. And so, as you said, I bought the woodworking business back in 1997. So I've been doing this for a while. That's thus the gray hair. But we started writing software in 1998. And so the software that you're experiencing, that you have, it was nothing more than we'd run into a wall. We'd have a problem. It's like, okay, we're going to solve this systemically. How do we solve it? And so there's 24, 25 years worth of pain and agony and development behind what you're experiencing also, because our industry is so nuanced. It is not an easy industry. It's chaotic. We get caught between a rock and a hard place between our customers and how we end up having to close work, sell work, and then the scheduling aspect on the backside. And so that would be point number 2, for woodworkers by woodworkers, for joiners by joiners. And then your third point, which I think is absolutely spot on, we think this way in terms of problem solution. The things that you see in the software are trying to solve the major problems that we all experience in this industry. And if we can't, in the software plus the education, give a concrete basis to making it easy or making it at least systemic to solve those problems, we're not doing our job. And so I love the fact that you, in different words, articulated 3 of the 7, 8 things that we want to do at Innergy to have success. So I appreciate that. It warms my heart that you saw that already.
Now, Katie actually told me all of the 7, I think they are.
Okay, our value props. Yeah.
There was transparency.
Yes.
There was
that's our creed. Yeah. Okay.
The creed.
You're into our value set.
The run to the problem.
Yep.
Those are 2 that stuck out to me the most.
And first, seek to understand.
Yeah.
And so that's an important aspect, because too many times, as you already mentioned, there's software out there. It's like, well, this is what we do, and therefore, this is what you get. It's like, no, we want to understand, and we want to do reverse demos with you. And I think that you probably had some of that experience of help us understand how you do your work so that we can end up communicating what your number 1, number 2, and number 3 problems are. And we'll show you in the software how that works, and then also show you how the software can be customized to your specific workflows. And so there's that seek to understand first, problem identification, problem solution is what we refer to it as, the education component. It's not just the education for our clients. We invest a lot in terms of our employees, the 70 employees that we have. They either have to train or they're going to education events in and of themselves. So that's great that Katie ended up sharing that with you. That's a lot of fun.
Yes. So what really speaks to you valuing the philosophy around your philosophy around manufacturing and how the business should be run?
Yes.
Is you create restriction in the software, which is not because of a programming issue. No. It's very easily, you can program all these things in.
Yeah.
But our throughput, we have to work out before the 1st of every month.
Yes.
And once you work out what your planned throughput is for that month,
the
plane takes off and you can't edit it.
No, you can't.
And it is just on you and your team. For the orange worm to beat the black worm.
Yes, exactly. When you look at that chart, absolutely. And so what you're alluding to is there's things that, let me do it this way. We voice of the customer is very important to us. There's some things on our requested roadmap where it would absolutely make it easier for our clients. Like, hey, we're halfway through the month. Can we change the plan number? We could, but that's not the right answer. Because what you're doing is you're moving the goalposts. You're changing the metric. You're not solving the hard problems that you need to solve throughout. And so there are things in the software that we've planfully put there, I would say, in order to make sure that the organizations are doing the hard work of getting behavior aligned and the organization understanding how planning the prior to the month, then on the 1st of the month, that number is solidified and you can't change it. We should have visibility 30 days in advance. Great. We all agree with that. So the software should support that. When I have clients that come and say, well, we're halfway through, let's change the goal. No, don't change the goal. Fix what the root cause is that caused you to want to change the goal, if that makes sense. So there is a little bit of psychology in the software to make sure that the organization is helping the employees get to the next level, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think let's give the audience a little bit more insight with what we're talking about, because riding the orange worm sounds very obscure.
Well, you might have a graph that shows up on the podcast right about now.
Okay. So what we're talking about, and let's see if I can get this, if I can say this in a succinct manner.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about is before the start of every month, we plan our production.
Yes.
We work out what our total throughput is going to be.
Yes.
And we use data that's provided to us by Innergy to make those decisions.
Yes.
Such as whether it's from a just-in-time standpoint of when our customers need the goods.
Yeah.
It could be based on how much available capacity there is.
Yep.
It could be based on what our target margin and fixed costs are.
Yes.
And we are trying to maximize against one constraint,
Yes.
which is our factory capacity, our
Yes.
manufacturing capacity.
Yes.
And once we have decided what that throughput looks like,
Yes.
based on the work orders in our system, which
Yep.
we're managing, the system gives us visibility as to what actions we need to be taking in order to hit
Yes.
that production target.
Yes.
That's how I sort of am
Yeah.
understanding it.
Yeah. And the black worm that you just described was or that you had mentioned is everything that you just described. So when you hit the first of the month and you've done all that planning that you just referred to, that puts that line in place. This is where you need to be by the end of the month. This is where you need to be on the 15th of the month, etc. And the orange worm that you described is your actual performance against that black line. So that planning for the month, that is the black line, and your orange is the actual. And you got to get that orange worm to chase that black line. Yeah. Absolutely. And so, you know what? My heart is very much warmed with what you just described, because I'm like, we could drop the mic right here, because you don't need me sitting on the other side of this table. You get it. You absolutely get it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, just sharing my experience, one thing that's really, really helped me is having colleagues implementing with me together.
Oh, yeah.
And we all do very similar work.
Yes.
In the same market, pretty much.
Yes.
So I consider myself very lucky to have these friends working on and gamifying the implementation together. Because if they've got their label scanners up,
and you don't,
we need to get going. But you see, Hugh and Will from the Cumming Brothers are exceedingly capable. So I've framed the narrative in my favor, and I've said that they're the hare and I'm the turtle.
Yes.
So I'm in it for the. I'm here for the marathon.
Oh, and do you guys have any bets between, implementation or any other bets that you have?
Look, there's a lot of healthy ego going on. So there's a lot of things happening there.
Well, I saw the three of you at the table yesterday at our educational event in Sydney, and so there is some healthy, really healthy competitive dynamic there, which I loved, but a lot of respect at the table. You guys were having fun at it with it. And I remember you giving, was it Will, a hard time about not reading? Hugh. He didn't. And so we got to put this in the podcast that Hugh didn't read the goal yet.
He doesn't know the goal.
No, not yet.
But I'll tell you this, he's very good at the goal.
Yeah, I bet he is. When they told me what their day's throughput were, I'm like, okay, you beat me in my operation back in Minnesota in the US.
Those guys, I've got to give my props to those guys, because the way that they run their business, they're very low key, but there's some great stuff happening there.
Yeah. And to your point about that gamification and competitive dynamic, I love the fact that you've identified it. And in our implementation process, we don't have a critical mass yet here in Australia and New Zealand. But as we do, one of the steps that we've used in the States is we create these cohorts. And so as you're implementing, you're going to be compared in terms of your process and that implementation to your cohort. And so it's somewhere between 8 and 12 different companies. And so you get to see, hey, we're at this spot after 2 months. Here's where the cohort was. Hey, 80% of the cohort is using the software these many minutes or these many hours on a per day basis. Here's where you're at. And so we give the owner in our industries, those owners seem to be very competitive. I would use a couple different words, but competitive might be nice at the moment. And by just giving some of that data to them, they're like, hey, I like winning. And so we kind of leverage that natural tendency in part of our process. It's a fun aspect of the implementation, at least from my perspective.
Okay, so just to give our audience a little bit of value, what have you seen about the Australian, whether it's the construction industry or manufacturing industry, or more specifically, maybe the cabinet making industry? What do you see about the businesses? I know you're a numbers guy, you're a research man. What do you see about our market here? What are some insights that would be valuable to us?
Yeah, great question. So So I'm going to make some. We don't have some hard data yet.
Mm.
We will. There's a industry benchmarking tool that we're doing that is available through the end of May. We're trying to get some data and provide some value to the rest of the industry, whether it's New Zealand, Australia, Canada, U.S., where our clients are at the moment. But let me just articulate and make some transfers of the U.S. kind of profitability, because our clients have been basically, as we've shared U.S. based data, have said it's pretty darn close to what's going on here down under. And so in the States, I have data, and you saw that the other day, going back to 1995. And the industry average profitability at an EBIT, so an earnings before interest and tax, or an operating profit, they kind of mean the same thing, has averaged in that period of time about 5%. It's probably closer to 4.5, but let me round up a little bit. Let's just call it 5 for this realm. So there's just some general observations. Let's just spend some time about that profitability number. That number hasn't moved. It is a flat line for the last couple decades. And so what it's telling me is our industry is not making advances as a whole in continuous improvement. And so we let our customers, we let our suppliers, we get caught between a rock and a hard place between the two. And we're not doing much more to move the needle to make double digit on a percent basis, or start to push that number a little bit further to look like a software firm in certain years. Now, with that, I would say that upper quartile performance, and I know that this isn't Australia or New Zealand related at the moment, but again, I'm being told that there's a pretty good transfer right now. Upper quartile for performance, the wedge, the gap between average and upper quartile is getting larger and larger over the years. It used to be about a 6-point difference. So if it's average at 5, upper quartile is about 11. It's now running 13, 14%. And so it's telling me that top 25%, they're making their investment in their workflow. They're making their investments in their people. They're not just using technology or equipment, the faster piece of equipment, spindle speed, whatever the case may be. It is true investments, I would argue, in the front end of the process. So that would be point number one. I'll stop there and let you have some comments. I have some other observations too, if you wish.
I mean, I just think the 4% or 5%, even 8%, is a little bit sad.
It is sad.
I think it's a little bit sad.
Yeah, it's a lot sad, actually.
And I don't know what the numbers are exactly in Australia.
Yes,
but all these small business owners.
Yes,
perhaps not the most sophisticated operators.
Yes,
but working the way that they are,
yes,
dealing with all the issues that they're dealing with,
Yes.
and taking on the risk that they're taking on, and walking away with 8% a year, or 5% a year, should be better.
Yeah, it's tough. When I chat with business owners in the States, and I'm starting to have some of these conversations down here, I hear things like, "Well, it supports a lifestyle." Okay, I get that, but that's not enough. And then I hear people say, "You know what? But when I retire, I'll have my building paid off, and so that's my retirement plan." I would argue that's not enough either. We should end up for the risks that we take and the product, the sexy nature of what we do, because what we do is phenomenal. I mean, it is the aesthetic aspect of whether it's a home kitchen, a residential, a shop fit out, whatever the case may be, we do some damn sexy stuff. Maybe you're going to edit that out. Okay, then I won't give you a different phrase.
No, I agree.
Oh, it is, but 4, 5, 8%, it's not enough.
Because no one needs a fancy brass ceiling detail. No one needs that. There's a reason we're putting it in.
It is. It's that unique nature.
There's a pursuit there.
It is. Absolutely. It is their identity. It's a personal brand when you look at our product in the home, for instance. And so that 5 to 8%, let's just call it that 4 to 5, because I think that we're going to have some data here soon, and I'm willing to bet that it's going to be 4 to 5 in terms of an average. 4 to 5%, a lifestyle business with I'll own my building when I'm done. Not good enough, in my opinion. And so how do you, and you made a comment earlier about maybe joiners and owners of joinery shop fit out companies aren't sophisticated. That's okay. You don't have to be. What we're trying to do in this package called Innergy is create this construct, this system that's not just a tool, but it's the education piece, it's the service piece, where that lack of formal education, we have education, which is the education of hard knocks. That's why I got all this gray hair on my face. It's not because...
So it wasn't from Harvard.
I did go to Harvard. That is true. I try and avoid that candidly, because that usually intimidates people. However, yes, I did get a very good education there, but I also got a lot of education out in the real world. And so what I like about what we're doing is you don't need to have that formal Harvard education or that formal technical education. This system allows you to excel your organization in a manner that's, I would argue, is easy if you put the effort into it. So that's what gets me excited.
What's your success rate with with your operators who?
Oh yeah.
Because I can think of those guys those old school guys, and I respect them. Because they teach me, you know, especially 100%. as a young kid in the industry. Yeah. I look up to these guys, and you know, they pave the way, and you know, they teach me a lot.
Yes.
But some of them are very stubborn. Right. Some of them are very stubborn, and they just don't want to hear about it.
No, they don't.
What's your success rate with? And you may not be targeting that archetype of customer.
We are, and so let's talk a little bit about segmentation. And so let's just create a little bit of a persona. And so let's assume that it's GI generation, or it's someone that's been 20, 30 years into the business, doesn't necessarily have a succession plan, sawdust in their veins, right? Loves working on the shop floor, loves the sexy aspect of the product at the end of the day. I would argue the leverage for success, and this is one of my phrases, profit is defined in the office. It's established in the office. It's realized on the shop floor. And too many times we spend our efforts and energy on the shop floor, and we ignore all the ones and zeros. We ignore all the information and the workflow in the office. And so to that individual that I would say is senior, gray hair, kind of looks like me, has the wrinkles on the face, has been in the business a long time, and has a whole set of intuitive rules. I don't think technology it has to be scary. And so part of our process, we target those individuals. And let me give you a little bit of how we approach it. If you're above 40, above 40 folk look at software and go, oh, I don't want to click that button because it might break something. Below 40, and you could say above 50, somewhere in that range. Below 40 says, ooh, let me see if I can click on that button and break something. There's absolutely a difference in terms of mindset and how Gen Z and you guys grew up versus my generation and how we grew up. And so we target specific education for those CEOs that don't want to be embarrassed in front of their staff. They know that they need to upgrade in terms of technology, but they feel like a fish out of water when it comes to tech. Tell you what, you don't need to understand every single aspect of the system, but what you do need to know is how to ask the right questions and use the 3 or 4, I would say 30,000 foot reports, or let me go 15,000 meter reports, if you will. I'll put it in, out of imperial into the right measurement
You've done
system.
A very good job of doing that, by the way.
Well, thank you. They don't need to understand every single detail, nor be afraid of the technology. And so we'll do some private tutoring for that specific archetype. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I mean, just again, a word on the service. So one thing that really stuck out to me was, because when people buy ERPs, they always think implementation, right?
Absolutely.
So what I was told as a customer was there's no implementation allowance. There's no 40 hours.
No,
there's
none whatsoever.
No 3-month period.
None whatsoever.
There's no additional cost.
None.
And not only that, there is an incentive.
Yes,
Innergy creates an alignment where we get,
yes,
if I may say,
absolutely
30%, roughly 30% rebate on our upfront cost.
Yes.
Should we eat healthy, exercise, and, should we do the things that we should be doing?
Yes.
Which is, using the LMS resource, using the Peak resource to watch all the educational videos, to follow the implementation checklist, to get people on board, to do throughput meetings, to do workload meetings, to do these things. And then we get a 30% discount at the end of the year of our upfront costs. So that's something that level of support.
Yes.
So yes, it is 1 + 1 = 3, but you guys invest a lot on the back end to see that through.
Yeah. And so to your point, it is, we refer to it as all you can eat buffet. You come to the table, you come to the party, it's an all you can eat buffet. Now we're going to try and get you to be we're going to teach you to fish, to use a food analogy, but we are not, because what we've seen in software is people are like, I bought this software, but I don't want to pay X per hour to have so-and-so get retrained or to get up to speed on this. And so it just sits on the shelf. It becomes shelfware. And so that ends up being a hurdle to the organization's success. And sometimes it is a mountain that we have to climb to get through the implementation. And so why do we as software folks put all these barriers in the way to make you kind of go, yeah, man, I regret and I hate my software choice? No, I don't want you to do that. I want you to fall in love with us.
Well, the reason they do that is because their mission isn't to have raving fans.
No, absolutely not. And I know if we get over that hill with you and we meet you more than halfway in terms of that rebate and we incent. And oh, by the way, I'll just give you a little bit of an insight in terms of our process on the backside. So that incentive system for that third off on the front end, we think that there are about 7 things that make a perfect implementation. And so during our discussions with you, we're evaluating you. We're saying, okay, are you overweight and you need some exercise? Are you saying that you're not doing the right diet? And so we look at these 7 things and we evaluate where your strengths are and we evaluate where your weaknesses are. And that's where we come back to you and say, oh, by the way, we noticed that you do want to buy this, but your owner never showed up to a demo. That's a problem because you need to have owner support in this. We'll still sell you the software, but here's the deal. We're going to give you all of that third back if that owner comes to one of our educational forums. If they come to one of our events, we'll give you the whole thing back. And oh, by the way, they got to bring somebody with them because here's the deal. When somebody comes to our 1 week long education event, they never leave. Absolutely never leave. It's a transformative event. Now, it's currently only in the States, but we're going to start doing it down here, whether it's in Sydney or Melbourne or Auckland and Christchurch. We're going to start getting a rotation of that 1 week forum down under.
And and I love how you were saying that you tailor the implementation to the needs of the customer.
Oh, absolutely.
If senior manager, CEO is, very experienced, very well respected, you said, quite frankly, he doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of his staff or her staff.
Yeah.
Let's make them feel safe.
Exactly. And so one-on-one training and just to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to click. I'm going to show you what you need to do. And then we're just going to let you walk through it at your pace. None of your staff is around. And what we're really trying to do, again, you've mentioned it earlier, the workload meeting is that tool that you end up touching your organization 52 times a year. Every week you have a workload meeting, not a production meeting. And you and I, we've talked about that. Production is about what's going on the shop floor. Workload is about the whole organization and looking at the metrics of the whole, not the parts. And so if we can prep the owner to sit in and ask the right questions first, sit in and potentially run that meeting, depending on the size of the organization, and know where to go, know what to ask, he or she is going to be successful. And then that's going to build confidence. And in that confidence building, then they're going to learn more and spend more time in the LMS learning that next feature. So how do I configure my bottleneck report? How do I get it so that I can look at PM number 1 and PM number 2 and PM number 3 and start to evaluate how they're doing in the organization? And at that point in time, I have clients, owners, where they said, we've really appreciated the personal tutoring and the fact that I can be at my vacation home or I can be anywhere in the world, log into my laptop, and I can see all the metrics and know exactly what's going on in my organization.
Mm.
It warms my heart when I hear those stories. And in fact, I have clients that will send me photos of them on a hiking trip. They have their laptop out and they're on top of a mountain, and they take a photo of the widget page in Innergy with them hiking. It's like, okay, I get it. I know exactly what they're doing as long as they have cell coverage.
As long as the PM workload is up this month, we're good.
Exactly.
We're good for next month.
Amen. Amen.
How does all this apply to service-based businesses? I mean, we have a lot of independent contractors like plumbers, electricians, HVAC, carpentry teams. It's very, very common in Australia. So many of those small businesses.
Yes.
How do they benefit from this type of thinking?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And so there are multiple ways that we can think about it. Let's pick on the one of the themes is choosing your own client, choosing the right customer or right projects to chase. So many times, whether it's a joinery company or a plumber or HVAC, whatever the case may be, what I find in the construction industry, so many times we get into a habit. We have these clients that we kind of get a relationship with. Doesn't mean that they're profitable, but they're easy on the front end. But at the end of the day, they may not be the most profitable work that fits us as an organization. And so one of the things that I end up talking a lot about within the joinery aspect of Innergy and even my shop is playing the 100 project game. And that 100 project game is applicable whether you're a service provider, you're doing HVAC, life safety, it doesn't matter. So let me just kind of talk through what those steps could be, because that would apply to your wider audience. So step number one, take the last 100 projects that you've done. And everybody that you've talked about in that service or that product or HVAC, we're all doing projects. We are all project-driven businesses.
Yes.
So you take the last 100 projects that you've done, put them in a list. And whether you do this based on a contribution margin, an EBIT number, or intuition, it doesn't matter. But take those projects and you rank order them. And if you're doing it based on intuition, which is absolutely fine, you got to get your staff together to do that intuition. So let me just talk about that one. So what you don't want to do, though, is you don't want to say, have your staff arguing over this one's number 48 and this one's 52. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. What you do is say, here's our top 10 projects. Okay, here's our bottom 10 projects. See if you can get consensus on that. And then everything else is in the middle. So you just take that concept, one, list them, two, top 10, bottom 10. You're really deciding on now 20 projects out of 100, or do the percentages if you don't have 100 projects. Now what you do is the important step. And this is where you start to get to a rinse and repeat on an annual basis. Take the bottom 10, lop them off, take them out of the equation, and now redo your income statement. Look at it from the perspective of, okay, now I only have 90 jobs. Yes, my revenue went down, because it will, but what happens to your profitability? I'll guarantee that your profitability will move up. And so whether you're that HVAC, you can go through that exercise. Any service provider that's doing projects, project type work can go through that exercise. And once you're done, look at the bottom 10% and say, okay, why do we not like this? What is the theme? What are the themes in this bottom 10% or 20% that make it painful? Maybe the client never gives you a schedule and you're very schedule driven. Maybe the client ends up beating you up on change orders at the end of the day. Maybe, and you start to determine, and I'll give you a hard example for Wilkie, my shop. We did this, one of the years that we did this, we recognized we love healthcare type work. But the problem is we love healthcare work that's greenfield, that starts from the ground up. We are terrible at remodeling healthcare. And we realized that about 3 years into this process. It's like, no, we're schedule driven and they are not schedule driven. So we either had to add a turkey tax, which we did, or we just don't bid that type of work. And so whether you're an HVAC, life safety, doesn't matter. That 100 project game, I think, is very applicable to any of your audience from that perspective. So there's one idea.
And it gives you, and what it does is it gives you visibility on the type of projects, the type of customers, the size of projects, the
amen.
geographical location that you should be saying no to.
Yes. And now take that 100 project game. Now add the column. And let's say you just listed out the project by name and you don't have a decent set of data. It wouldn't take you very much to add the data about contribution margin. So now you're adding another column, or add a column about who your project manager was within your organization. And you could start to do these pivot tables of like, okay, is everybody having an equal distribution of good jobs and bad jobs? Or to your point, what about geography? Hey, tell you what, we just learned that most of the work that's in the bottom 20% seems to be about 300, 200 kilometers away. Oh, maybe that's something that we need to avoid. Maybe it's the type of work. And so just doing this 100 project game and adding another column, PM, who drafted the work? What about not just drafting? What geography are we in? What market code? Add the customer's name. And you might find out that there are clients that are at the bottom end of that continuum, that are in the bottom 10, 20%. It's like, maybe I need to find a better client. And there's enough work out there. I saw what Melbourne's doing. I've seen what Sydney's. I couldn't keep track of the number of sky cranes that are out there. Huge investment in the construction sector. Sorry,
we've got more cranes in Australia than the US.
I believe it. Yeah, with what I've done thus far, I'm like, yeah, it'd be nice to have a woodworking or a joinery shop down here. This would be fun.
Yeah.
So, but the software side's occupying most of my time now.
I have a selfish question to ask.
Yes.
Australia is a very wealthy country, and
yes,
the people here, we're very lucky.
Yes.
So for me, in my organization, one of the really key things I want to do is to give my people purpose and fulfillment.
Yeah.
How?
Yeah, that's a great question. So,
because the way Katie gave me an hour and a half lecture about energy, about the creed, about how it gives her, how it gives us a platform to argue about issues, to make decisions.
Yeah.
How do you create that?
Yeah. So let me start with a simple phrase that I constantly use. So I'm the CEO of Wilkie and I'm the CEO of Innergy. And CEO does not refer to Chief Executive Officer. It refers to Chief Environmental Officer. I think it is honestly my job to create an environment for success for my energy staff, the 70 folks that I have on our way to 110, and for the 75 people that I have at Wilkie doing joinery type work. And so I think the answer to this question, it's got to start at the top. If culture at the end of the day always starts at the top, you can't, how you and I behave in our organizations will set the tribal stories that the rest of the organization tells. How do we behave relative to our value set? How do we behave when a mistake is made? Are we looking for the punishment to be the person or the process? And so if you're looking for engagement and involvement, it's got to start with you and I. And if that is not in our heart, if that is not something that is natural to our behavior, I argue in our week-long class that it's got to begin with you. If we're not sharpening the saw, and if we're not out ahead of our organization and leading them, we're not going to get there. And I would argue for your audience to think about it this way. Name an organization that the leader is behind the rest of the company. Not behind in terms of support, but not out ahead, pulling the organization along to where they need to go. And I struggle to name any company that's successful where that's the case. Maybe Uber a long time ago when they had their conflict, but there isn't a successful organization out there that the leader's not out in front, pulling that organization along. So number one, in terms of what you just described, I would say it's you and I. It's people like you and I. It's the top of the pyramid. And so if that's your audience and listening to this, if it's not beginning with you, the listener, it's not going to start. And whether you're the CEO of the organization, that chief environmental officer, and you own the business, or you're running a drafting department, or you're running the team on the shop floor, I would say you are still a leader with a capital L, if not a lowercase l. And so you still, in your pyramid, are at the top of that pyramid. And so everything underneath you is going to drive whatever you behave, however you behave. That's going to drive in that part of the organization. So number one, it's got to start with you and I. Number two, we're just at Innergy, we're about to have our third strategic event, and it's an offsite event where I bring my management team together. When we get to our fourth one, I'm going to have my management team bring their next lieutenant. We're going to get to the size where I need to drive some of the things deeper into the organization so that I'm touching everybody. But we're going to go back through our fundamentals. Who are we? What's our mission? It's raving fans. We're going to spend time on that mission purpose and to make sure that everybody in the organization recommits to that. Okay, great. We're then going to spend time talking about our integrated set of activities. Who are we and what do we do? We're going to spend time on our value proposition. We're going to spend time on our values as an organization. Transparency, that's a huge value for us at Innergy. Voice of the customer. We want to hear what our clients are saying, elevating our customers in terms of raving fans and listening to that voice, and then having as one of our values that problem solution. All of this starts to combine. But if you're not educating as a leader, if you're not reinforcing that throughout the organization and giving the cage to be free for your employees, those bumper guards, if you will, of here's our values. That's out of bounds when you're beyond it. Here's who we're trying to become, because we can't be everything to everybody. There is no best soap. There's no best shampoo. There's no best airline. There's an airline that delivers a certain need. And I would argue it's the exact same thing for the people that are listening. There's no best HVAC supplier. That's an HVAC supplier that may provide emergency service when in the middle of the winter and your furnace goes down. That's a perfect niche to be in. There may be a joiner that is about on time every time because it's all about the delivery. And so there is no perfect soap. There's no perfect company or best company out there. But all of that has to begin at the top with you and I. And so I'll stop there. And I probably could monologue for a long time on this topic, very much. So I'll let you ask additional comments or questions.
Yeah, I just think it is the most important thing for my thesis is that for a sustainable organization,
yes,
that can, it's the only way to grow sustainably.
Yeah,
is my thesis.
Yeah, and so to that sustainability piece, I think about our businesses as raising kids, and so my objective. And you mentioned, I have 3 boys, and we talked a little bit about that earlier. I want to end up creating men that are well-founded, rooted in a good, strong value set, that are contributors to society and doesn't need mom and dad holding their hand anymore. Does that make sense? But if we think about that and we distill what I just said about my kids, my 3 boys, that's the exact same objective that we want in business. We want to get to the point where the organization is sustainable. And I would argue that the evolution of our businesses go through that same nurturing stage that we have to do with our toddlers and our infants, where we have to hold the hand and do some of the work, right? They're going to go through that prepubescent phase of where, there's some testing, but we're still providing guidance and rules, et cetera, to the organization. Then it goes through puberty and then hopefully to adulthood. Unlike you and I, humans, we're going to get to adulthood one way or the other. It's kicking, screaming, whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, businesses can stop. They can plateau. And there are a lot of things that we need to think about relative to our business evolution and maturation. And that thesis that you talked about, sometimes, and here's my phrase that I end up using, sometimes you don't teach your 6-year-old to drive. I would argue you never teach your 6-year-old to drive. But mom and dad need to help that 6-year-old get to the point where they're sustainable and they drive. And when they do start driving, they got some curfews, right? If that makes sense. But eventually, there's no curfew. There's no driving. You hand them the keys to the car, you pay for the insurance, and it's sustainable. And that's some of the stuff that we're trying to get to. And so if you think of managing your business like a parent, that is a long-term 20, 24-year process. And that evolution of what we do as parents, I argue there's a lot that we end up doing that we've learned in terms of gray hair in that parenting process that we can apply to our business. So anyway, you just got me on another one of my soapbox in terms of management skill.
That's a good one. I actually haven't heard of that one before.
I use those I use that terminology a lot. My team at Innergy is extremely aggressive and is always pushing forward. And sometimes I have to remind them that we're only 7 years old as an organization, and we're not yet ready for some of the stuffs that they're pining for. There's a couple more steps that we have to get through, and we're going to get there. But to get to full SOPs everywhere in the organization would actually be crippling right now. It would probably erode some of our agility as an organization, as a 7-year-old, fast-moving, agile organization. Now, when we get to about 200 employees, absolutely, standardization is absolutely necessary. We got to do it in the right way using technology. But at a 70-person shop, not yet. Not yet. We still need to have that agility. And so those are some of the efforts that you got to think about as that parent of your business. When is the right time to give them the keys to the car? When is the right time to say, whoa, these aspects of who we are still important, and we don't want to do something that's going to erode that yet. We're going to get to standardization, but not yet. We'll evolve through it.
What are some of those other values that have served you really well in the last 20, 30 years?
Yeah.
And what are some of those values that you wish you held on to a little stronger earlier on?
Yeah. That's a really, really good question.
And obviously I'm asking this for an obvious reason.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So, gray hair wise, I'll give you a couple, and I'm just trying to prioritize right now. And this is me. And so I'm not espousing this value for everybody in the world. And so please know that. Uh, at my joinery business, the employees own 45% of it. My wife and I own the other 55%. One of my values that I think is really important to bring an organization along, especially with those hard moments, is to make them business owners, mentally give them a stake in the game. And so I learned that one a long time ago, that I'm old. And so I use the example of a Michael Jordan or a Michael Jackson. I'm not that talented. And so how do I get my organization aligned to move in the exact same direction? And that's a really important aspect for me. We do the exact same thing at Innergy. And so I had to convince my Polish partners that providing equity and an upside to the employees is one of those phenomenal alignment tools within the organization. So that'd be number one. Number two, just always be honest. I mean, I can't, there's so many people that I end up meeting. My transparency, there's a phrase that my staff uses. We are stupid transparent, but we're not stupid. And that transparency, I think, is healthy. And when you combine like number one and number two together, I think my employees can handle understanding the nuances of a business. They can handle understanding seeing the income statement. At the end of the day, they're running a business in and of themselves. That's their home. They got a mortgage. They got bills that they have to pay. They have a budget. They have a revenue line, a top line. That's usually if I used a U.S. number, it'd be a W-2, but it's their compensation, their salary that they get on an annual basis. They know how to handle those things. And respecting our employees from the standpoint that nobody comes to work in putting their pants on in the morning and go, you know what? I'm going to do a really shitty day. Or if you want to take that out of the podcast, I'm going to do a really crappy day. Nobody does that. They get caught in this environment where it's like, you know what? I gave the boss 3 ideas, or I can't implement any of my ideas. And so it's you and I as leaders that cause our organization to erode at times. And so that's number one, put that together. Number two, be transparent and share with the organization the good times and the bad. And if there are bad times, I promise you, if you're honest and open with your organization, they're going to rally around the business. Absolutely. So that sense of urgency, there were 2 times in my career that I lost money, and I lost a significant amount. After 9/11 was one of them. The market just collapsed. The Great Recession was the second. We got through year 3, 1, 2, and 3 of that. Year 4 was painful. And the organization knew how to handle that stress. And we were honest with it. And so there's at least 1 and 2, but I can probably give you a long list just in terms of, and take a full hour of a podcast just on leadership and management. So,
because I feel this, a lot of just assessing my own behavior.
Yes.
I think a lot of how I feel is like your team at Energy.
Yeah.
You know, we want to keep running through walls.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, we just want to keep running through walls. But something that Energy has taught me that's I believe is starting to serve me well and will continue to serve me very well, is by using technology, we can get the business model to make sense.
Oh my gosh.
And once the business model makes sense, once the margins are correct and they're better than correct.
Oh yes.
Now we can scale sustainably.
Yes.
And we can do so in a way with speed.
Yes.
And by sacrificing a little bit of margin.
Yeah.
But still having the correct margin profile at the end of the day.
Yes.
Whereas so many trade businesses in Australia, at least I see, is year 1, they've got 3 guys, and then they've got 15, and then they've got 40. And then it's, unfortunately, so many of them go out of business. Yeah. Because they're scaling without the correct processes is such an overused word.
It is an overused word.
But they don't have the correct margin profile. They don't have the correct systems in place, I guess. Again, very cliche.
Yeah.
And so what Energy has shown me is if you just slow down a little bit, implement just those 1 or 2 things at a time, things are magical. So, I mean, just to share what we've been focusing on, and in our weekly meetings, everything's linking back to these 2 things.
Yes.
1 is the perfect release, and 2 is
oh my gosh,
a term that we've coined called stage to completion.
Yes.
So the perfect release, how we define it within the organization, is all the information is there, and there is a handover meeting with the draftsman.
Amen.
The second thing is all the materials are in the factory.
Yes.
And the third thing is sufficient time is allocated to the project.
So
those are the things that we're looking at for the perfect release.
Yes.
And what we're saying is we really only want to be sending jobs down to the factory that meet that criteria.
Yes.
The second thing that we're looking to that we've been focusing on is what we call stage to completion.
Yes.
And those are 4 things. 1 is the job set up in the factory? Is it staged? Is it free from defects?
Yes.
Is it ready for installation?
Yes.
Because setup and ready for installation can be 2 different things.
Yes.
And finally, a debrief meeting needs to happen with the draftsman.
Yes.
So then, and to create the feedback loop.
Amen.
From start to finish.
Yeah.
And so we're centering everything that we're talking about, whether it's scanning labels for purchase orders, or whether another term we've coined internally is called Venn diagramming.
Yes.
It's about over communication, about creating overlapping communication about the things that really matter.
Yes.
All that is there to service the perfect release and service stage to completion.
Yes.
Because if we can get those 2 things right, our throughput is going to fly.
It will absolutely
fly. And
fly.
once it flies, that's when we can scale.
Yeah, because you're going to end up finding free capacity from that perspective. And you're absolutely right. And I know that we're talking about process and systems, but I'll use a different word. It's about getting the foundation right. My former mentor, Wilkie of the Wilkie Sanderson, who I met in grad school, he had a phrase. He said, sometimes, Mark, you have to put your thumb on growth to fix the things that broke. Fix those things that broke, and once you have those fixed, now go for the next plateau. And so I've used that phrase of, it might be time we put our thumb on growth, just stop, fix everything that did break, and then we're going to be ready for that next plateau. Absolutely. So I love the fact that you're working on the perfect release. I love the fact that it's about the throughput out at the end. You put those standards in place and it becomes cultural. It becomes habitual with your staff, as opposed to, wait a minute, I need to get that release out to the shop floor because the shop's not busy. No, is the answer. And now the organization takes a different thought process. It's like, well, we're never going to put something that's not perfect onto the shop floor. It's cultural. They're not coming to you to argue and say, hey, boss, can I release this because they need to do some work? No.
That becomes very simple.
It is simple, absolutely simple when you achieve that. And then I promise you, on the backside, you'll have that steaming Jenny was another expression that Walter used to use. But you'll have that money-making machine, or you'll have that cash calf or that cash cow. I don't know if those expressions are cultural down here,
Yes.
But
No, I'm not sure about steaming Jenny, but cash cow is.
okay.
Yes.
I think it was Walter's generation when he would be probably 90 years old right now. And so that may have been a generational phrase for him. But anyway, so yeah, I think you're spot on. Absolutely spot on. My heart's warmed. I love what you're saying.
Thank you. Okay, so who should get in touch with Mark Sanderson?
Oh, anyone that's still listening to the podcast at this point in time, I'd say that, because we've inspired and we've at least grabbed your attention to some extent. If you are a joiner in or a shop fitter in the New Zealand, Australian markets, we are coming down here with a vengeance, being aggressive. We want to make sure that we get our raving fans to expand onto your shores. And so we're really excited about coming here. So I just really appreciate the fact that you've given me a little bit of voice and allowed me to communicate some semblance of wisdom maybe, or gray hair to your audience. So I thank you very much.
Look, thank you. I truly believe, and I really, I don't think, and I'm being honest.
Yes, sir.
I don't think it is just me being young and excited.
Yeah.
I really believe that Energy is one of those paradigm shifting moments.
We're going to change the world. Yeah. We're going to change our industry. And you can hear, you can even hear, and now you're getting me excited about that, not only just about raving fans, but we talk about, we're going to change the industry. And there's so many things that end up making this industry at the end of the day kind of sucky. And when you think about the 5 forces and some of the leverage that we can get when we unite by using technology, and there's just, now I can't even finish a sentence because my brain is getting so far ahead. The fact of what we're going to be able to do with AI and the application of AI to making our businesses and our industry so much stronger. Just,
no, I agree. The amount of room for disruption,
amen,
which is why you're doing the design.
Amen.
We haven't spoken about design today because that is the pain point of the whole industry.
It is absolutely the pain point.
Not factory staff,
no, it's
not delivery, not the latest 3-axis, 5-axis CNC machine. None of that matters.
No, it's all the ones and zeros on the front end.
Yeah.
And if we can do some things to streamline that foundation, that
Sorry,
workflow.
I'm not saying none of that matters. That matters immensely.
It does. That's table stakes.
Yes.
Everybody does that. Everybody's looking to buy the most, the latest piece of equipment and deal with those issues. Those that end up being upper quartile, I would argue, understand that the front end is where the differentiator is. Understands it's ones and zeros. It's all about information management and getting to the point of the perfect release before the sawdust flies. And if you can get and discipline your organization to that perfect release, it's all about the ones and zeros and the data management. And streamlining that process. Again, I'll repeat what I said earlier. Profitability is determined or defined in the office. It is realized on the shop floor. Once it gets to the shop floor, there is nothing that you can do to recover from a bad job. And bad jobs begin from the moment that you look to bid that project, all the way through to that perfect release. Every decision we make all the way through either adds or subtracts to that being a good job or a bad job. And once it hits the floor, 5 days later, it's over, or 7 days later, or 3 days later, or 4 weeks later, it is done. You don't have a recovery period. And so the profit is defined in the front end.
I think that is the perfect way to end this. This has been Mark Sanderson. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And thank you for being on the Site to Studio podcast.
My pleasure.